And today I'm going to talk about risk management, which sounds like something from an MBA class, but I'll be actually using my hands-on experience running a gaming studio, a game publisher, and trying to use as many real examples from our past experience, mostly negative, to produce something you can relate to. Before I proceed to my topic, I have to answer one really important question: who the hell I am, and what on earth gives me credibility to speak about that here today. 4.5 years ago, I co-founded a company which is called Creative Mobile. It was just 3 guys, including myself, your typical small indie team, obsessed with making games. No real experience, no resources, self-funded, self-published. Apparently, we got a few things right. And by now, I have published more than 20 titles. Combined, they brought us nearly 250 million installs. So we are your typical indie success story, coming from nowhere to 8-digit revenues. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk how we achieved that, because that happened 3-4 years ago. That was a different market back then, and you shouldn't care about tactics we used 4 years ago, because they're not working today in a more mature environment. Instead, I'm going to talk about our transition from being a developer to being a publisher, the practices that we adopted, the hard lessons that we learned. And I'm calling this a transition because these are actually 2 very different jobs. Back in the day, we used to think about self-publishing as the standard way to go. 4 years ago, there were a handful of studios working with publishers. Most of us were thinking that we don't need one because we can just put something on the App Store, it will get discovered, be downloaded. Over time, we have come to realize that the developer's job and the publisher's job are completely different. Primarily because as a developer, you are building something you love. Even if it's a little bit ugly, not really functional, you're putting your soul into it, you are attached to it, you love it. That is your product, your baby. While as a publisher, your obligation is to say no a lot. And the reason is very simple. Every game, or almost every game, has something good about it, something likable, something that makes you want to publish it and bring it to the people. But 99% of games are not making any significant revenue. So the only way to survive in the long term, even in the medium term, is to say no a lot, and say no a lot to things you actually like. And that is what we call the science or art of risk management. When we as a publisher look at a product, the first stage where we start assessing risks is the earliest stage, the prototype stage. We get this package from a developer. There's a prototype and there's a vision which explains how this prototype is going to become an awesome product. And when we look at that, we're trying to assess this product and the market where it's intended to be sold. And by market, I'm not meaning the games market or mobile games market. I mean the specific genre, the segment of the audience we're going to sell to. So we're looking at how innovative the product is. Is it different from the competition? And then we look at the market and try to figure out how much competition there is in the first place. We're looking at technology which is used in the product, potential lifetime value of a customer. Again, compare it to the user acquisition cost in that segment of the market and standard lifetime value of competing products. We're looking at the overall appeal, how impressive it is, how good it looks or is going to look in the App Store. Again, compare it to the audience which is available to us, their preferences, how picky they are, where do they place on the casual to hardcore scale. And finally, look at the brand potential or community building potential. If there's already a brand, or is there potential for building a future brand out of this product? And while looking at these aspects, we're asking ourselves one very important question. Can we ultimately sell this game to the people? Doesn't matter if it's paid or free-to-play. I'll be speaking mostly about free-to-play products. And that big question is broken up into a bunch of smaller questions. Beginning with number 1, can we do a nice push initially? Can we cross-promote it with our audience? Because just having an audience you can cross-promote to doesn't mean it's going to work. There has to be some fit, really good fit between your audience in your network and the intended audience of the product. You can't sell dress-up games for teenage girls to guys playing racing games. It's not going to work. If there's potential for getting this product featured. Now, this is not the holy grail. Initial push is not the main component of publishing, and it doesn't really determine long-term success. But if we can do this right, we can, in many cases, get some money back in the first 5 to 10 days, and this is how we can minimize the risk. And if we can do that, our risk is already reduced. We feel a little bit safer. Then we're looking at the long-term strategy for the product. And this is largely based or revolves around lifetime value of the customer. Because in the long term, if you want to be successful, you probably want to do some kind of sustainable marketing. And that is based on the famous LTV versus CPA equation. Now, there's a lot of guesswork involved in that. There are two problems with that equation. First, you don't really know the LTV, because it changes while the product is live. When you have a prototype, you have no idea. You have to use your gut feel and experience, looking at the game mechanics, individual components of the game, trying to figure out how high is the spending cap going to be, what's the conversion going to be like. That's one problem. The other problem is that you don't really know the average CPA of the market. You know some kind of average value for the entire games market, which is published by companies like Fixer, for example, and they say that this month, average cost per loyal user was $1.5. But you can't really compare it to your game, because different games have different LTV profiles. So there's a lot of guesswork, a lot of gut feel, and of course experience. By answering this question, we are trying to identify the long-term risk. Are we going to be able to market the game after the initial push? Now, again, look at the long term, thinking about community building potential. Community is something that can really prolong the life of the product beyond the initial few months. Good community can make a product, can keep it alive for years. In some extreme cases, decades. Building a community is a really difficult task. There's only a handful of mobile games that have been successful in creating a brand out of nothing and turning it into something marketable. You know Angry Birds, you know Zeptalab. Guys from Zeptalab say that you need 10 million MAUs, monthly active users, to build some kind of a brand and start thinking about merchandising and stuff like that. In our experience, it also depends on the game. When Drag Racing, our biggest hit, was at its peak, we had 15 million monthly active users. We were not really considering making it an offline brand because we didn't have anything we could attach it to. We didn't have any characters in the game. Bottom line, it's really, really tough. But if there's potential, if the game for building a community around it, again, it minimizes our risks. And it makes us more confident about the product in the long term. Another big question, how large is the addressable audience? Now, when we're looking at the mobile games market, it's freaking huge. It's 1 billion people. And no matter which segment you pick, it's probably going to be in the millions of users. But the thing is, if it's 1 million among 1 billion, that's 1 in 1,000. And these users can be pretty tough to reach. So we really want to understand how we're going to reach those users. And if the segment we are targeting is large enough to eventually make it worth our while. And the final question, is there something about the product which makes it less than super easy to copy it? Because we've seen examples where a game that copies another game actually outperformed the original one and stole a huge chunk of its audience. If you ask me after the session, I have an emotional story to tell about one of these instances. Now, looking at all these aspects of a given game, we're trying to understand how much risk is involved, how we can minimize it. Now, once we proceed to the production stage, there's, again, a bunch of huge risks associated with making a game, even if you are not developing it in-house. First risk is the relationship with the studio or relationship with individual developers in the team. We firmly believe that great person comes before great performer. We've seen plenty of examples when we had developers with great CVs, great track record, producing great content, who just didn't have the chemistry in the team or didn't have this chemistry between themselves and the publisher. And this can lead to really ugly results. For instance, when you tell the developer they need to do certain things in a certain way, they say, yes, of course, we will do it. You receive a milestone 2 months later, it's not done. Something completely opposite is done. And from our experience, chemistry, understanding on a personal level, liking those people, is really, really crucial. And if this isn't working on a personal level, it's one of the reasons to say no, because it's only going to lead to trouble in the long term. Next question, or next risk, is the first playable. It's super obvious that when you develop a new product, first playable must come super fast. Like the first milestone that is delivered should be playable, should include the core gameplay so you can evaluate it. Sadly, this is often not the case. And we've often seen studios who really like to develop technology. So they spend 3 months, 4 months working on a product, and they ship the first milestone, and it's just a technology showcase. It's not playable. Again, this is a signal that something is going wrong, because you are not going to understand if the game is going to be fun if you cannot play it. And this is especially the case with studios run by technical people, coders, because coders like to code. I'm a programmer myself. I love to write beautiful, modular, reusable code using all the right patterns. In the context of game development, that doesn't really matter when you're producing the first few prototypes. And we had some funny situations in our own team, in-house teams, when we, for instance, hired a guy from a bank. And he's brilliant, he's very creative, coming up with all sorts of bright ideas, but he's been working in a bank. And in a bank, beauty of the code is the #1 priority. And we had to spend a couple of years educating this guy that in gaming, if the game is not fun, you're not getting any awards for writing the most beautiful piece of code ever. It all goes to the trash bin. All your refactoring, all your modular structure, straight to the trash bin. No use of that. Everything that's delivered, any new milestone, should be player-centric and include new gameplay elements that help us determine if the game is fun or not. Deadlines, another big issue. I'm sure every one of you have missed deadlines, because that's a big characteristic of our industry. We're always missing deadlines. We're always shooting by months, sometimes by years, and we've come used to it. And it's actually fine, as long as you know why. If you don't know why, that's a sign of trouble. It's like you bring your car to a mechanic and you want to change your brake pads, and that's a 50-euro job. Then they call you and say it's going to be a 500-euro job. And you're like, what the hell? This isn't right. Now, when they tell you that you need to have your brake discs replaced as well, you can live with that, because in the end you're paying more, but you're also getting more. And your car will perform better as a result. Same with development. Missing deadlines is often okay if you are getting more of a game. Eventually the game is more fun, and you are conscious about what kind of sacrifice you're making, what's the result of that. If a studio cannot explain why they missed the deadline, it's a sign of trouble, and that's another reason to say no right there. And finally, playtesting during the production. Internal playtesting is crucial, because if you don't play your own game, it's highly likely other people will not play it either. If you don't like it, they will not like it. Playtest internally, iterate, play, iterate. If a developer, if a team does not like their own game, they don't play it. Another reason to say no. And it's really, really important to understand that it's never too early to say no, it's never too late to say no. Blizzard famously said they canceled Titan a few weeks ago. They had both the size of a planet to do that, because they spent years working on that game, and there's a whole bunch of people who put their souls into it. And of course, parts of it will be reused later, but that's a big trauma for a studio to cancel a project. But believe me, an even bigger trauma is to release a game that sucks. And that really kills the spirit, and we've done that. And it's really, really a big mistake. So it's never too late to kill off a game that is not going to work. If the game survived the initial playtesting, we bring it to the market. Now, first thing we want to do, again, to minimize the risk, is to look very carefully at who the player is, what kind of product they are expecting. Again, sounds really obvious, but too often we lose focus. We're drawn into making games that we personally like, or games that include technology that we like. We're not thinking about the player. The best way to validate if your game is interesting to the player is to do an external play test. There are companies that specialize in that. They've actually gotten pretty good at it. We use them a lot. They let you select the audience. So if your game is intended for male players, you can choose the male players, aged, say, 18 to 35. That's doable. They film the gameplay process, they film the player, so you can later take a good look at all the players, what they're doing, what are their emotions, when they're stuck in the game, what kind of emotions you can see on their face. The key trick is to make it all actionable. So if you just do a play test and you then receive some kind of aggregated result of it, it's not enough. You have to really digest that information, make it actionable, change something in the game, play test again, and repeat it until you're satisfied completely. Next part of minimizing the marketing risks is the packaging. And by packaging, I mean the icon, the screenshots, anything that represents the game in the App Store. Early on, we kind of prioritized this above anything else because we didn't have a marketing budget, so all we got was the packaging. And we have an anecdote where we changed the title of a game and the icon, and it went from being downloaded by 1,000 people per month to being downloaded by 10,000 people a day. So it can really make a difference. Again, the problem is you're not going to be able to identify winning titles and winning icons. You can become pretty good at guessing it eventually, but the only real way to figure out what's the best icon, title, screenshot, promo, image combination is to test. And to test those things, we usually do campaigns using ad networks. So we create a banner with one of the icons that we think can be a winner. We create another one, we spend 200 euros on a campaign, we measure the click-through rate. Very simple, not very expensive, gives you measurable results. When this is all done, next stage is soft launch. Again, a lot of developers we talk to think that soft launch is evil for whatever reason. They think that once they soft launch a game, everyone in the world will know about it, and they will kind of ruin the whole big launch thing. It's not true. Players don't care. If you soft launch a game, players try it 2 days later, they'll not remember it. It's not going to be a big event in their lives. Our practice shows soft launch as much as you want. You can soft launch twice, you can soft launch worldwide. Google Play is especially useful for this because there's no approval process, updates are instant, so you can just take your first minimum viable product, put it out there, measure the KPIs, take it back, improve it, put it out there, measure the KPIs. We often soft launch globally. It's not just Canada. We just open to all the countries, look at all the markets, see how the players behave. I have a case where the game has been in soft launch for 8 months, and it was totally worth it. It's an opportunity to tweak the game, and tweaking the game can lead to a huge improvement in the KPI, so please don't waste this opportunity. Once we've launched, a common side is a game that is not performing. It's really, really common. You have this idea of your intended KPIs, you launch a game, KPIs suck. What to do? No reason to become depressed. It's a common occurrence. We see that in most cases. Every chart-topping game at some point was average or plain bad. I very well remember how 3 years ago I met Ilkka Paananen from Supercell, one of the founders of Supercell, and he showed me a prototype of Clash of Clans on his Samsung Galaxy S or something. And I was like, oh, it's a strategy game, nothing special. And it really wasn't anything special. And then they were making €1 million a day. And any title you see in the top grossing charts, it used to be average at some point. In our practice, we've seen games that have improved the LTV, lifetime value of the customer, by a factor of 5 during the post-launch diagnostics improvements. One key trick is to be very conscious about analytics, and if you cannot do it properly, it's, in our understanding, a publisher's job. We as a publisher, we rarely ever ask the developer to do the analytics because that requires quite a lot of expertise, that requires quite a lot of data you can gauge your results against. So And now I understand it's a publisher's job, and it's really, really useful. Now again, there are hopeless cases. And in some cases, it's better to kill off the product, just swallow it, and live with it and carry on. But in most cases, it makes sense to do the math, figure out how much it costs you to support a product, what can it eventually become, and keep working on it. Maybe not 100% of your resources, but a part of your resources dedicated to that. Biggest takeaway, launch day is overrated. It's not really representative of what your game will ultimately be. And like I said, all the great games were average or bad at some point. It's just that their creators had the vision, persistence, and resources to perfect those games. Final thoughts. Games are not magic. We used to think that games are something special. Unlike any other industry, we produce something magical and people love it. This is not the case. We've passed the days where this was the case. Games are just like any other business. If you work with great people and you have great chemistry in the team, if you know your customer, if you understand your customer's needs and what kind of product they really want, if you are conscious about your competition and clearly understand how you can differentiate from them or outperform them, then you can build a product that players actually want and eventually make a lot of money. There's no magic in that. Just common sense, willingness to ask yourself the right questions, say no at the right time, iterate, iterate, iterate. That's it from me today. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Hello. You said you soft launch globally. So what's the difference between soft launching and launching then?
There is none. It's purely psychological. Okay. And that is actually the answer. It's a little bit different between the markets because on the App Store, on the Apple App Store, generally launch day or this event of launch has more significance because the market is more volatile, and you can only really get featured when you launch the game for the first time. You can't do this 10 times and 10th attempt get featured by Apple, get the main banner in the United States. On Google Play, there is no difference really. So you can launch a game, but you can just keep a low profile, maybe put some small marketing budget behind it, push it a little bit up the charts to get some organic traffic flowing in, then measure the KPIs, increase your marketing spend, decrease it. We don't see a difference. It's purely in your head, whether you are popping champagne or not. Or you can pop it multiple times. We've done that as well.
Hi, hello. I am wondering if these rules, or so to say rules, are modified in a circumstance where an independent team has no funding, and what if it's about a team who develops a game that's not meant to be on the market? Are these rules modified in that case?
Develop a game which is not going to be on the market? How did you say?
It's not meant to be, so to say, profitable, It's supposed to be on the market so people can play it, but it's not necessary to generate revenue.
Yeah, of course. I'm mostly speaking from the publisher's perspective. If your mission is to create something with, well, not just revenue in mind or not focused on making money, then of course these rules should be modified. And this is not really rules. It's not like we have a sort of handbook in the office which says you should do this and this and this. It's just our experience publishing games, because we love making games. We're a developer in the first place. We started as a small bunch of indies just trying to make something fun. But we've come to realize that if you want to succeed in the long run, if you want to employ 78 people like we do, and still be around within 5 years. Revenue is the lifeblood of the company. You just can't do without it. And my pitch today is focused on making money. So of course, if you're doing this just to entertain yourself, or to teach people something, or you're on some other mission, of course, these rules can be modified many ways.
Right, thanks a lot.